again, and welcome to part 2 of our coverage of the executive order mandates recently signed by President Obama. Last I left off, I covered 1 through 12. Let's continue. Executive Order number 13. Maximize enforcement efforts to prevent gun violence and prosecute gun crime. Well, I've got a problem with this. Let's remove gun from that sentence. Let's, instead of prosecuting against gun crime, let's prosecute against violent crime. Yet again, as per this new video, we'll do another safety check. Magazine is clear, gun is clear, firearm is safe. The latest FBI studies, more crimes, more assaults, and more murders were committed with hammers, clubs, and other blunt instruments than firearms crime. More vehicular homicides were committed on an at least 3-to-1 ratio than firearms. Let's not just focus on prosecuting firearms crimes. Let's focus on prosecuting all violent crime. But no. The president has to be more directed because he is, after all, an anti-gun politician. And why? Because there's 2 reasons. Number 1, there's money in it. There's a lot of money in being an anti-gun politician. And, well, if you follow the track record of all anti-gun politicians, they're not liberal. They never have been liberals. They've disguised themselves as such, but they're totalitarian in nature. No, if the president was truly against violent crime as a whole, he would go for prosecution against violent crime. If he was truly anti-violence weapons, then he would mandate your average Home Depot and Lowe's as much as he would mandate a 4473 or any other particularly harsh means of acquiring a firearm, every bit as much. He would basically make you have to go through a waiting period as well as an initial trial to see if you needed a screwdriver or hammer. Needless to say, I have very big problems with the anti-gun coalition. Their logic is fallible at best. Number 14. This is where we start to get into controversy. Issue a presidential memorandum directing the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, to conduct research into the causes and prevention of gun violence. Yet again, Mr. President, remove gun from the sentence. Also, if you can't see where this is coming a mile away, I will gladly inform you. The CDC has always been anti-gun. The reason the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, were pulled from gun violence research is that they were known to be non-bipartisan. They were known to be partisan. They were known to be led by anti-gun coalitions. Last I checked, the desire to own a firearm, the ownership of a firearm, or the interest in the ownership and use of a firearm is not a disease. It will never be a disease. But you're going to see the president with the CDC under his beck and call try to have it considered a mental instability, a mental deficiency, a mental disease. Remember, as I showed this last time, this is a celebratory cigar. I don't make it a purpose and a point to smoke these too often. It's actually pretty rare. It only takes a moment of celebration to get me to smoke a cigar. But yet the CDC sees this as a detrimental, self-harming act. Well, I'm not going to argue with them. It's not healthy. but if enjoyed in moderation. In my case, once every couple of years, and only once every couple of years. This is not that self-harming, but yet something that I do enjoy on a regular basis, which is shooting paper targets. Well, they're going to say that this is 10,000 times worse than if I smoked these on a daily basis, which I refuse to. They're going to say that the desire to own a firearm is in fact a mental illness. Don't believe me? Take a look at the latest psychology guideline books where it denotes that all emotions, be they positive, negative, things like happiness, elation, sadness, joy, anger, righteous indignation, all these are considered mental diseases treatable via the use of psychotropic medicines. I have severe problems with this. The CDC and the FDA have a long-standing history of pushing medicines which honestly have no place in the market onto the American populace. Take into example, Prozac. In the right cases and under right prescription can be a very good thing. Prozac also has a nasty side effect when it's misdiagnosed, when depression is misdiagnosed and it is prescribed to the wrong individual. As a psychotropic, it can cause psychotic reactions. Take that into account. These are the same people who are turning, someone who might be mildly depressed, there may be even a case of seasonal depression, which can be treated through the use of multivitamins. They're treating someone with seasonal depression as someone who is rather seriously depressed and mentally unhinged. And imagine that they would treat us firearm owners, or anybody who plans on buying a firearm, as a severe mentally unhinged case requiring psychotropic drugs or laws enacted to keep us from doing what we desire. I'm pretty sure you can see the failure in logic there. Alright. Number 15. Direct the Attorney General to issue a report on the availability and most effective use of new gun safety technologies and challenge the private sector to develop innovative technologies. And Mr. President, the private sector is always developing innovative technologies. What you're trying to do is push what New Jersey has tried to do and failed, which is to say, if New Jersey has a specific ruling where if electronic fire control device is put into any firearm sold within the New Jersey boundaries, that lockout measures are to be introduced into that firearm, and that firearms produced prior to that date cannot be sold without said lockout measure. This is a way for the president to ensure that firearms have a lockout system where he can say, okay, well, we don't quite trust him. Turn off his firearm. He's never allowed to use it again. Some very sinister tactics going on there. It's heavy-handed and extremely vague wording leaves it to be exploited by those who would abuse their power, such as the president or anyone in his coalition of anti-Second Amendment and anti-First Amendment politicians. You should be wary of this. Number 16. Clarify the Affordable Health Care Act does not prohibit doctors from asking their patients about guns in their homes. Except there's a problem with this. Strengthening quality affordable health care for all Americans, line 23, page 2037, that is line 23, page 2037, states, A, lawful ownership or possession of firearms or ammunition, B, lawful use of firearms or ammunition, or C, lawful storage of firearms or ammunition can neither be, data on it can neither be created nor maintained. If a doctor asks if you own a firearm, there are two things that prevent him from asking that, expecting a legal response to that question. Number one is his very own Hippocratic oath, as well as his own personal discretion. Number two is the right to privacy. When a doctor gets a patient, we'll give a hypothetical example. Let's say I had, let's say I was suffering from terminal leukemia. Okay, well, the doctor can't just allow that information out unless I give him permission, him or her, permission to give that information out. That's right of privacy. Failure to hold to that right of privacy is legally punishable. It is a crime. Now, the doctor must use his own discretion. If I, let's say I had no problem at all, I was just going for a checkup, but I mentioned outwardly that I had a violent intention, let's say I intend to attack target A. We'll leave target A rather nebulous, because I'm not making a threat towards anyone. Let's say, well, I really don't like target A, I'm going to attack him at blah, blah, blah. That falls under the Hippocratic Oath. That's a case of, Hippocratic Oath is, first do no harm. This also extends to allow no harm to be done. If I extend a threat towards any target, in this case it will be the nebulous target A, which is in fact my pillow, then yes, the doctor does have the right to release that data, because he knows without a shadow of a doubt that I, as his patient, have means, will, and intention to cause harm, bodily harm. Now in this case, target A is just a pillow. It might strike him as odd, mentally, in which case, as a doctor, he has a right to release that data, because obviously if I'm attacking a pillow, then I'm going to need some degree of mental help. But I bring upon, the idea of nebulous target A because I cast no threat to anyone. I just use it as an example. If you were asked by your doctor, do you own a firearm? Well, unless there's a gunshot and there's a bullet hole anywhere upon your person, I would strongly advise you to either plead the fifth, do not answer, which is what I would do, or let the doctor know it is of no concern whether you own or use a firearm. If I'm going in for a checkup, which I've got one coming here in the next couple of weeks, can't talk, next coming weeks is what I meant to say, and I'm going in for an exam, a checkup, the doctor, there's no pertaining data to whether I own a firearm or not. It doesn't matter if I own a firearm or not. I'm there for a checkup. I'm there to ensure that my health is maintained and that I am in fact healthy. That I'm not suffering from high blood pressure, that I'm not suffering from any disease. Just basically to ensure that on my record I am given a clean bill of health. As stated before, with the current tactics, the CDC, led by our president, the Anti-Gun Coalition, wants to view gun ownership as a mental disease. They're going to do everything within their legal right, and a few things which are not, to have that codified into some degree of law. Whether it is constitutional or not, they're going to try for it. Thankfully, we have lawyers ready to fight this. The NRAILA and the GOA are more than prepared, as well should you be. In other words, the doctors can ask if I have a gun. They're not getting an answer. Alright, number 17. Release a letter to healthcare providers clarifying that no federal law prohibits them from reporting threats of violence to law enforcement authorities. I've already covered this. There is no law preventing health providers, be they doctors, nurses, or otherwise, from being a conscientious objector and preventing violence. That goes with their Hippocratic oath of do no harm, allow no harm to be done. But understand, they're not going for the Hippocratic Oath in this executive order. What they're going after is back to what I proposed on the first video on Executive Orders 1 and 2. They want data mining. They want to understand every little thing about every investigative target so they can do their best to make sure that we, the people, are disarmed. There's money in gun control. That's why they're going to keep after it, whether they're successful or whether they are met with abject failure. Because regardless, they're going to make their money. And they're going to keep attacking because it's a way for them to continue making their money. If they succeed, they can still continue to make money. The only way that they will cease from making that flow of expenditures come their way is if we, as a united front of upright citizens, gun owners, and people willing to fight to protect every last constitutional right, tells them no. I highly recommend you do this. Number 17, all right, we already covered that. Number 18, provide incentives for schools to hire more resource officers. Yet again, the echo box, the tool of propaganda, which is MSNBC, NBC News, CNN, they've all echoed that Wayne LaPierre, the vice president of the NRA, was apparently tone deaf, paranoid, schizophrenic, an idiot, and other such pejorative and derogatory terms, insults, if you will, for suggesting this very thing. But yet when the president goes out of his way to steal the idea and sign it into executive order, the president is not treated with words of being called tone deaf to the situation of the American plight, being an idiot, or being this or that, or any other myriad of pejorative terms, derisive comments, or insults. No. Instead, we see gross, obscene idolatry towards the president and his anti-gun coalition, even though they're executing the same goal laid forth by us, the pro-firearms, the pro-Second Amendment, and pro-constitutional front. They're trying their best, the media, that's who I'm referring to as they. The media is trying their absolute hardest to demonize those of us who hold true to what made this nation strong. They're going to continue to do so for the simple fact, as stated before, there's money in propaganda, there's money in gun control. All this control and power, it's basically a circular motion of constant bribery, backpatting, and solid movements of enforcing ideals and goals which are wholly contradictory to the Constitution, our liberties, and our freedoms. They're going to continue, so should we. We have to continue vigilance, simple as. Don't let this idolatry pass for something which was recommended by us. They spit in our faces, yet the same idea that's presented by them, they're going to laud, appraise upon. They're basically going to treat Obama, King Obama as they consider him, as a golden god for an idea that was presented forth by us lowly, meager people, us peasants. Pathetic idolatry at best. Number 19. Develop model emergency response plans for schools, houses of worship, and institutions of higher education. Providing education is a very good thing. But these plans shouldn't be forced upon any institution whatsoever. Do I believe in the ability to put forth a fund to allow them to plan, to take independent contractors forth? Independent first responders such as firearms trainers, local law and fire departments, local EMTs, to train them on how to do it? Yes, but it shouldn't be passed as a mandate of law. That's basically the president overstepping his means of power. That's something that, if it were to be made by law, it should be voted upon by our senators and congressmen, not by our president. It should not be signed into law like that. It should be a bill first and then have the chance to be ratified, not earmarked by the president himself. He's overstepping his bounds. Number 20. Okay, we're in the home stretch. Release a letter to health officials clarifying the scope of mental health services that Medicaid plans must cover. Clarification is good. More on this after once we get to 21. Finalize regulations clarifying essential health benefits and parity requirements within the ACA exchanges. Yet again, clarification is good, but I expect with both number 20 and 21 that if you're planning and stating legally that clarification of treatments and available parity is your goal, Mr. President, do not do what you've been doing with the rest of your campaign, claiming transparency and clarification, when in reality all you were giving us is lies, frauds, and obfuscation of details. Best example I can give you of obfuscation of details: all of these 23 executive orders are signed the same day that Eric Holder and the president himself were demanded by the Senate and Congress to release details on Operation Fast and Furious, otherwise known as Operation Gunwalker. Because of this action, he has successfully used this executive order signing to obfuscate the details and to put the trial on a quote-unquote indefinite hold. This is a smokescreen, folks. We are being denied the facts and sold 23 executive orders in front of a row of children. Our president is exploiting children as a smokescreen. He's doing exactly what our terrorists that we face on a regular basis do. The difference between the U.S. military and the terrorists: the U.S. military will put themselves in front of women and children. Terrorists, and apparently our president, put the children and women in front of their actions so that they are covered from being a target. But that's a matter of a different scope. Number 22, commit to finalizing mental health parity regulations. This is a real empty promise to act. There's no real reason to tell an administration, such as the CDC or the FDA, or even doctors, surgeons, nurses, to do their job. They know to do their job. This is not reform. This is just flowery, heavy-handed words printed upon a page and hastily signed into action with no real direction. It's a smokescreen, folks. Number 23. Number 3, that would start me back on video number 1, now wouldn't it? Launch a national dialogue led by the secretaries, Syllabus and Duncan, on mental health. Communication's good. I normally won't put this down. But essentially all this says, out of legalese into basic English, is not only is it saying let's talk, but it's saying let's talk on ways to separate the people, we the people, from all of our constitutional rights, one liberty at a time. I have some problems with this, but it's written so very loosely that you can't entirely pin it down onto one subject. It could be really anything. It is one of the most vague hack job writing techniques you could ever use. There's no real purpose to it. As I wanted to cover in video number 1, there are a few things that we need to know what to boycott after these executive orders. Number 1 is Austin, Texas. They have a group website called Groupon, Groupon used to provide group coupons for things such as clothing, food, in certain cases firearms training. Well, their motto is collective buying power. Well, that motto should be changed to collective buying power so long as it doesn't involve anything involving the Second Amendment, because those of us in the Austin, Texas area who wanted to provide firearms training were giving discounts and incentives to use Groupon. Well, everything and anything related to firearms as a whole has been barred from being used in Groupon. As I used to use that website, I am now boycotting it. I highly recommend you do too. It's strictly optional, but please do. Show support for the Second Amendment. Show support for those of us who fight for your rights. Number two, if I can get to it, New York recently passed some controversial gun laws and a midnight signing which pretty much debar New York State citizens from their Second Amendment rights. I would openly encourage a boycott of any goods bought through New York State, bought through New York City. Any goods that would come from that are only going to do their best to fund New York. As the New York elected politicians seem to want to deny their people their rights, well, we're going to have to make their economy suffer a bit to wake them up. And the people there are going to have to do the same. I highly encourage that we do turn to them and say no. The downside is Remington is in Ilion, New York. I will leave that up to you to decide whether it's better to spend on firearms and ammunition produced in New York over other goods, but I at the very least encourage don't buy any other goods other than Remington that comes out of New York. Let those haughty anti-gun businesses suffer. And in their suffering, the people will rise up and tell their politicians, no, we do not accept this. We have a right, a constitutionally protected right to defend ourselves and to own our firearms. That is what I encourage. Also, the NSSF, National Shooting Sports Foundation, well, they're having a bit of a tiff, a major disagreement, if you will, with the Eastern Sports and Outdoors Show. The Eastern Sports and Outdoors Show is a hunting, fishing, and recreational expo. Unfortunately, the Eastern Sports and Outdoor Show's management decided to debar the use and sales of AR-15s and other quote-unquote tactical rifles from this year's events. This is a separation in the industry when we need to come together. Cabela's has already pulled out of that show, and if you're in the Newtown, Colorado area and going to attend this show, I would highly recommend that if you do, voice your opinion on this matter. If you can avoid attending this show, if you don't have to work it, don't. Just don't go. Don't give them your money. Don't give them the satisfaction of knowing, hey, we got one over on the Second Amendment Foundation. We got one over against the NRA. We got one over on the Gun Owners of America. Basically, I would say give them the middle finger, but honestly, that's not going to do anything. Vote with your wallets. If corporations such as Groupon, if municipalities such as New York State, and shows such as National Eastern Sporting Association, can't even remember the name, very unprofessional of me, Eastern Sports and Outdoor Show, sorry about that, I was a bit unprofessional, but this is all unscripted. If they all decide to try to pull one over us and pull the wool over our eyes and deny us our rights, okay. It's a private event. They're allowed to do so. But with that said, we can also deny them our money. Anywho, Thanks for putting up with this horribly unprofessional and probably far too long video. I will see you again later, America, and as always, stay positive. Thanks for watching.